Welcome back to Community Update. I'm Matthew Byard. Derico Symonds is a well-known activist and advocate for Black and African Nova Scotian issues in the Halifax area. He's a former civil servant for the provincial government and worked for the Department of Justice. Recently, he was hired as the new Senior Justice Strategist for the African Nova Scotian Justice Institute. In his new role, he's currently hosting a series of ongoing community meetings or engagement sessions throughout the province that aim to focus on a Black justice strategy. Derico Symonds, welcome.
Happy to be
This
here.
is my COVID handshake. How you doing? So I want to ask you about the ongoing justice sessions, but the African Nova Scotian Justice Institute, if I have this right, for those who never heard of it, it started as a grassroots organization that is now a provincially funded institute and law firm of Black lawyers and employees who work against systemic racism in the criminal justice system. Do I have the gist of that right?
Yeah, so that's the gist of sort of what the Institute does, and certainly, I like how you included start as grassroots community initiative, folks like Robert Wright and others sort of advocating for the Institute to sort of be formed. And through the work as well as ANS DPAD, or African Nova Scotian Decade for People of African Descent. And so, largely funded through provincial DOJ and really announced in 2021. And so
But it originally started as a grassroots organization with no funding.
Absolutely,
Right.
absolutely. And so, just to kind of the quick 1-2 in terms of what the Institute does, easiest to really explain it in the pillars. So we have 3 pillars, and the Institute is really a proactive and reactive really body to support, help with issues of anti-Black racism, systemic discrimination. So we have a legal pillar where we run a pro bono law firm, and as well as there's a justice advocate program where we will be doing things such as Know Your Rights campaign, and things around wills and estates. But really, what I want to drive home on that point, and I always, is that it's a pro bono law firm for Black people.
A pro bono law firm, I should have included
absolutely,
that, right?
yeah. And so,
Does this work similarly to sorry to cut you off, but
Yep.
like slip of the tongue, legal aid essentially for
Yeah,
Black
yeah,
people?
yeah. Very, very, very similar. Intake process by phone or online, and then once that goes in, lawyers sort of get an idea and understanding of what the concerns are, and then they support you. That might be full representation in court, or if you already have another lawyer who may not understand sort of the nuances of the case around being Black or sort of race law, our lawyers have provided education and training to other lawyers in that regard. The other pillar would be forensic assessment and treatment, or FATU, FATU. And under there is where we do the IRCAs, or Impact of Race and Culture Assessments.
Right.
And so we do those locally, and as well we're doing national training as well to train other assessors across Canada. And there's also some other mental health initiatives happening under there. So that's second pillar, forensic assessment and treatment, and then there's the strategy pillar. So that would be myself, and then
I was going to say, this is where you come in. What is your role? And your specific role, not to cut you off, maybe it blends into what you were going to just say.
So it's I'd say it's complex, but it's really somewhat of generalist as well. So strategists, or senior justice strategists, we're really, the way I like to explain it is that, if it's A, B, C, and we're trying to get to C, you pull in a strategist and you really ask, okay, well, who do we need to pull together? What organizations need to be a part of this? And let's start the conversation so that we're able to move through and get from A to C to get sort of said initiative, said conversation developed. We do a lot of partnership work, a lot of work across the province, but really a whole bunch of everything, bringing information, vision type of things. But you can imagine the strategy that might need to be behind a particular movement or behind a particular conversation.
Well, I know that there's currently ongoing justice strategy sessions. I know there's been 4 virtual ones that were at least scheduled, 4 in-person ones, one in Halifax, Dartmouth, Truro, and Tracadie, 2 more upcoming virtual ones as we record here late September. What can you tell me about that? Is there a specific strategy that you wanted to relay to the community? Were you looking for feedback? And if so, what feedback did you get? How have the sessions been going?
Yeah, so these sessions are based on Canada's Black Justice Strategy, which I'll explain in a second. But with with that, we are going out to hear from people regarding their feedback on really the federal justice system and the particular pillars that the strategy is based on. And so we want to hear from people about their experiences. We want to hear from people about really all things to do with the system: courts, parole, bail, immigration, and our feedback as ANSJI Nova Scotia feeds into the larger strategy. And I might add that there are 11 other organizations across the country who are having kind of localized conversations in their respective communities, all writing reports, and then all of those 11 reports feed into what would be the larger Canada's justice strategy.
Is there anything that you've taken away thus far as any main points that you maybe weren't anticipating? What sort of feedback are you getting?
Yeah, so there's been a couple, I would say...
Maybe that information's private. I mean, these were community engagement sessions.
Yeah, there's I would say that there's generally been some really gut-wrenching sort of stories.
Really?
And, some stories of, parents telling us, police officers arresting their kid and, threatening to do things to them. And I'm keeping the details a bit, of course, close, just to not identify, but some really gut-wrenching stories, some really interesting sort of ideas, initiatives that community would like to see, and some conversations that they're hoping to have with sort of justice bodies, I suppose.
To play devil's advocate, some people might say, oh, people embellish that sort of thing. Do you get that sense? Maybe from time to time, how do you balance that?
Yeah. So I think it's a fair question, right? And I think that when you're sitting down with elderly folk, senior folk, parents whose kids are not even there, they're telling the story of what they've went through as a family, the expenses that they've had to incur to find proper representation for their child. And so I can understand from the standpoint of people might say that these are embellished, but until you're sitting in the room with these folks who are emotional, telling the story of how they've had to empty their bank accounts just so that they were able to find proper representation and to support their child, I think folks might think differently.
So now, you were a civil servant for the provincial government, and you then became in that role under the Department of Justice, is that correct? What was your former role?
Yep.
And how, or does it give you any insight in your current role?
Yeah, so I worked in the Office of Equity and Anti-Racism Initiatives, and I'll sort of explain, because there's been some sort of recent changes. And so I was executive advisor to the deputy minister in that particular office. And then as of recent, Deputy Candace Thomas has taken over as the deputy minister in that office, and the office has went under the Department of Justice. And so, finishing out my term with OEA, I was a Department of Justice employee, but I think it's important maybe just for people to know that the office always wasn't under DOJ, but it now is.
Is that good, bad, or just a minor thing?
Well, I think that I think it has its pros and its cons, and really, I would see it that I think with any office, especially titled Equity and Anti-Racism, I think that there's a lot of autonomy in just sort of being a standalone, independent office versus being under a larger department, because issues, concerns, things might get lost because DOJ is huge, and so I'm an advocate for it being separate. But of course, that's not my decision to make.
So when you say you were an advisor to the deputy minister,
yep.
What specifically sort of things does that entail? What did your 9 to 5 say look like Monday to Friday?
Yeah, so there was a lot of different things that were happening at that particular time. So one, I sort of ended up overseeing really all, mostly external, but internal engagement efforts as well. And then it entails sort of advising on which direction we might want to take on certain initiatives, advising on issues of anti-Black racism or issues of interest that may be public interest or issues of interest for the office in particular. And as well providing advice on how to respond to certain things if they have kind of come our way.
All right. So it wasn't initially under the Department of Justice, it sort of went under the Department of Justice. Where it did go under the Department of Justice, does that give you insight in your role with the African Nova Scotian Justice Institute?
Yeah, I think that I would say that the insight and really valuable information, if you will, that it kind of gave me was that getting a bit of an understanding more of how that department works. Large department, a lot going on, a lot of different initiatives. And so insight in terms of, what is happening in the community, I would say that I gained that experience just through working in community and being around, but understanding how government works and how to actually get things passed and policies and whatnot. I think that did give me pretty valuable insight and also understanding sort of who's who. That's helpful for me kind of coming into this role with the Institute, so that I'm better able to, whether it's place a complaint or speak to somebody or provide advice on how to navigate. I think, my previous role is very helpful now just with that information.
All right. So now the Justice Department, they essentially fund the African Nova Scotian Justice Institute, which is funded through 2026, I believe you said?
Yep.
So I guess what I'm wondering is, in your role, if but in part, is there a mandate to hold the Justice Department to account, and does that create any sort of conflict of interest, or was there any conversation about that when you came into your new role?
Yeah, so excellent question, because I sort of had similar thoughts, and really how I'd explain it is that there's somewhat of a balance because we navigate a lot through the internal channels, and we do hold folks accountable, and I think that it's about a balance, and knowing that we're largely funded through DOJ, knowing sort of what the Institute was to do, right, and if the provincial DOJ didn't sort of understand or respect what was in the particular proposal, they wouldn't have funded it. And so, with that in mind, providing the funding, seeing the proposal, they understand what our role is to do here at ANSJI. And so, just go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, is it, and I'm not, well versed in all this stuff, or I'm the average man off the street sort of thing, but I don't know, just for maybe to have it maybe not even appear to be a conflict of interest, or just to not have any sort of ambiguity either way, should another department maybe fund the Institute, the African Nova Scotian Affairs Department, or another department, or is there a conflict of interest?
No, so I don't see that there's a conflict of interest. I mean, I think that I think that DOJ, at least now and the way that things are working, would be the best positioned department within the province to fund it.
The best position.
Yeah, I'd say that they'd be in the most suitable position to fund it. But understanding what our mandate is, and it is to also hold the DOJ and other sort of surrounding folks on the periphery to account, which I think that we do at ANSJI publicly when needed, but also privately amongst some of the internal channels that we might navigate.
Right. And so where, I guess, scale 1 to 10, would you say are we right now with respect to systemic racism and anti-black racism within the justice system, federally, but provincially as well?
Yeah, so I would say that I wouldn't particularly provide a number because I don't want to, because that would just simply be my assessment, and my assessment.
Well, that's, your assessment. That's what
I
hard to say. You're still new in the role. Or in your new role.
I would say in terms of gains, I would say that there's a lot of promising conversations, a lot of hopeful things with this Black Justice Strategy, and a lot of really good things that I'm seeing progress made through the Institute and conversations, inroads, and relationships. So, it's sort of that thing of, we're coming along, but I wouldn't want to rate it because I could rate it, a good number now, but I could walk out here and see, oh, wow, something else has happened. And I think that if I give it a rating, that would then sort of feed into sort of politicizing Black people's lives. Because I want to avoid doing that. And so enough. I would say that I'm seeing a lot of promising conversations. However, with the Canada's Black Justice Strategy, for example, extremely promising, and love the folks that are behind it, and some have good connection to Nova Scotia. But my criticism would be that, and this is why I say promising, is because it in my opinion, would need to be enshrined into legislation. And so once the strategy is written and complete, if it's federally enshrined into legislation, that takes the politics out of it because it's now legislated, meaning that if there's a government change, prime minister change, or priority change, this strategy for Black people isn't effective because it's legislated to happen. And so, promising, and then there's the but, I suppose.
So for folks who maybe didn't get to attend any of the sessions, what can you say about the Black Justice Strategy? What are the main things people should know about it? Is there anything happening in the courts right now that folks should be paying attention to? That's sort of two different questions. But
yeah, absolutely. So, quick high level sort of on the justice strategy is that they have it's based on a few pillars. So the social determinants of justice, policing, courts, corrections, parole, re-entry, and reintegration. And so those particular components of the justice system are what the strategy is focused on. There's 11 organizations across Canada doing localized conversations, and then there's 9 people who make up a steering committee, one of which is Vanessa Fells, of course, African Nova Scotian. And then there's 2 writers of the report. One is Zilla Jones, sister of Dr. L. Jones. So as I mentioned, we have some great connection here. And then the other is Dr. Akwazi. And so that's sort of the makeup and the gist in terms of how the strategy is meant to work. And then the second part to your question was just regarding...
Well, I mean, is there anything that, this is all good to know, but if folks, they want to get more involved or learn more, I mean, should they log on to the to the website or...
Yeah, so great question. So, what I would say is that if people want to know more about the strategy, if people want to ask me questions, I'm all about accountability. My email is Derico, Derico, Symonds, Symonds, @ansji.ca. And if people want to know more information just about the Institute, simply www.ansji.ca.
That's how they get in touch if they earn maybe legal or need legal help, something like that.
Yeah, so if people want to contact me personally, I can provide the information for legal support. Or if people want to go on the website, there's an online form you can fill out right there, www.ansji.ca, and the form will go directly to our lawyers. Either or would work, however people want to seek support.
He's the Senior Justice Strategist for the African Nova Scotian Justice Institute. Derico, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Community Update is brought to you with the support of the following organizations, businesses and individuals: Heritage Canada, Canadian Association of Community Television Users and Stations, Cactus, M4 Media, Flenjor Foods, Halicraft Buka, Sheyi Ajitamobi, Yogesh Mehta, and Natural Butter Bar.